And so then they're going to tell you, because we're always the fools, right? Like we're arguing amongst that you need to go fight the Muslim people in your community, that they're going to establish Sharia law. That's the low hanging fruit. They're going to establish Sharia law. Well, maybe they could have kept the Sharia law in their own countries if we didn't kill 1 million of them, like just in like one simple setting like we did in the Iraq war. Right? The Iraq war, we just killed like 1 million Iraqi civilians, by the way. Okay, just civilians, as in like you and me, nothing to do with the war. We did that.
I've been saying this over a year ago, in fact, almost since I started this channel. I've mentioned some of the key points that only journalists and commentators seem to be just bringing up and raising now about the manufacture of anti-Muslim hatred, cancel culture of the right, and the fundamental problems of wars and devastation in the Muslim world that then causes a refugee crisis, as they call it, trying to blame refugees who are escaping for a better life. I want to show you a number of videos, a number of clips, a couple from Nick Fuentes, one from Candace Owens, and one also from Mehdi Hassan and Owen Jones when they were discussing together. So let's look at this video. I posted it before in a previous video, but it ties in so well to the rest of the clips that I'm going to show you. So let's look at the answer from Nick Fuentes, who's responding to a question about why don't you explain the threat of Muslims and Muslims in the West and Muslims and Islam in America?
Thanks for all you do, Nick. May the Lord Jesus continue to bless you and keep you safe. The biggest complaint I hear from boomers when I bring you up is that you're not hard enough on the Muslims. 99% of us are tuned in enough to know the truth. But can you take a moment to address the ignorance of these people and clarify your take on Islam? Also check your Twitter DMs regarding safety and security for you. God bless.
Thank you for the huge super chat. I don't need to pander to anybody. You asked me to pander, I will do the opposite. All these boomers think you don't hate Muslims. Say you hate Muslims. Muslims are not the problem in America. There, I said it. Do I want more of them here? No. Do I want Sharia law? No. But are they the problem? No. Will you take a moment and pander to idiot boomers? No, I will not. The reason they want us to hate Muslims is because Jews are fighting Muslims in the Middle East. And as long as we think Muslims are our problem, then we'll think that Israel's enemies are our problem also. If we view the world through the lens of Muslims are the civilizational enemy, then it makes it that much easier to get us to want to fight Hamas and Hezbollah. But Hamas and Hezbollah don't threaten us.
Again, just because he says something slightly correct doesn't mean we should now suddenly accept everything he says. We've got to be mature and a bit more critical in regards to this. For instance, he's not an ally of the Muslims. You know, he doesn't even like Islam and Muslims, and he wants to see less Muslims in the West. But he makes the point that there's a concerted campaign to push anti-Muslim hatred to justify support for Israel's barbaric actions against Muslims in Palestine, to make it seem that, you know, Israel's war in Palestine against Lebanon or against Gaza and against the Palestinians and against other countries is somehow America's war as well. The argument also is simple. Muslims are fanatics. They want to kill every non-Muslim. There's no way to deal with Palestinians except through genocide. You can't negotiate with them. They don't have any rational justification for what they do. They are just crazed, irrational barbarians who, if given the chance, would kill us all, whether that's in Israel or the West. That's the narrative that they're spinning. That garners for them, or they seek to do this to garner support from Western populations to the actions that Israel's doing, claiming it's part of a global war, a civilizational war between the West and the Muslim world. And Palestine and Israel are on the front line of this. I even mentioned that there was a leaked Israeli research that basically concluded that in order to halt the declining support for Zionism and its entity, they needed to increase anti-Muslim hatred. Now here's Owen Jones and Mehdi Hassan explaining a similar point when discussing the banning of the Maccabi fans.
Maccabi Tel Aviv fans went round singing anti-Arab racist songs, pulling down Palestinian flags from private homes, and attacking people violently in the street. There's overwhelming evidence. Even Israeli newspapers confessed that they were going around attacking
Dutch photographer caught it all, who you and I both interviewed.
We both interviewed, so we know what the truth is, but this was then portrayed as a pogrom against Jewish people. Keir Starmer and Lisa Nandy, the British government, as well as the British media, decided to throw Birmingham under a bus to help, by the way, whip up bigotry against the Muslim population
on behalf of
to protect racist football hooligans from a state committing genocide. It is so...
Many of these hooligans, by the way, ex-IDF soldiers.
Oh, and that was
many
the
of
other
them
point.
served in Gaza.
The police report made clear that, and this is the other point.
They learned it from Amsterdam.
They went through and said that these were trained and organised, and that they were linked to the IDF in hundreds of cases, and therefore they posed this particular threat. I mean, it's just the fact that the British, or because I remember Keir Starmer, he'd always go, the number one priority of any government is to protect the people of your own country, and he was willing to throw his own citizens under a bus to protect.
Well, are
racist
British
footballers.
Muslims really British in their eyes?
This is what it comes down to, because we've had this over and over again over Palestine. We've got this when, for example, they tried to shut down parliamentary debates on the basis that they're intimidation from pro-Palestinian protests, and then it always jumps over to Muslims, and it all becomes about Islamophobia. They are willing to incite and whip up prejudice and bigotry against Muslims in order to protect a genocidal state, and then call anyone who dissents the actual racists.
So not only were they trying to protect Israel's genocide, but look how slavish they are, that they wanted to protect Israeli hooligans as well. And the way they did that was to blame the problem on the Muslims. The reason why these Maccabi fans can't come to the UK or can't come to Birmingham is because of the large Muslim population, and there might be another pogrom against the Jews in Birmingham. So it's clear they're trying to say it's the Muslims are the problem. Islam is therefore out of control in the West. But also, Owen mentions another point about how they cancelled and changed the votes in Parliament. It was done at the time to protect the Labour Party, but they claimed, the Labour Party, it was done because of the fear of radical Islamists that might target MPs that vote against Israel. Blame Muslims, create fear to protect this corrupt political system over a vote on Israel. And so it's all about protecting Israel and protecting this corrupt political system. That's why we then started to see headlines and statements like these.
A baying mob threatening murder, forcing the scrapping of a vote in Westminster, the mother of all parliaments, and the home of our representative democracy. What a time to be alive.
The mother of parliaments appears weakened and diminished as a result. We have allowed our streets to be dominated by Islamist extremists.
And I explicitly said this over a year ago, and now it's being picked up. Same thing is being now raised by others from the left and also even from the right as well. So here's another example about the so-called problems of mass immigration.
Ashley Blair writes, hello, Candace. I'm Bailey, and I've been a fan of your show since you were on the Daily Wire. Foreign Muslim immigrants are swarming into Europe, Australia, Canada, and the U.S., and I wanted to see if you had an opinion on Israel's involvement in that. Yeah, well, here's the thing. Israel sends us in to smash the countries that they live in. They create the refugee crisis, and then people complain about how these people have nowhere to go. I can't believe that Israel is taking over Syria, and now there's all these Syrian refugees. I can't believe Israel. It's just they're expanding their borders and they're pushing these people into countries they don't want to be in. Do you think that the Palestinians don't want to stay in Gaza where they've been? Of course they do. But look what's happening. Trump needs a casino. Right? Jared's doing deals. They want beachfront properties. They're invested in this. And so then they're going to tell you, because we're always the fools, right? Like we're arguing amongst that you need to go fight the Muslim people in your community, that they're going to establish Sharia law. That's the low hanging fruit. They're going to establish Sharia law. Well, maybe they could have kept the Sharia law in their own countries if we didn't kill 1 million of them, just in one simple setting like we did in the Iraq war. Right? The Iraq war, we just killed 1 million Iraqi civilians, by the way. Okay, just civilians, as in you and me, nothing to do with the war. We did that. And who did we do that for? Do you think it was because we were looking for weapons of mass destruction? That's what they always say. That's why they're trying right now. They want Iran. They want to force this change of power in Iran. Yeah, that's kind of the repeat thing. We're spreading democracy. For who? No, we are expanding Israel's borders, and we are rendering everybody around Israel weak. That's what the picture looks like. Your son should not be signing up for the military until it's fixed. That's my personal opinion.
Obviously, we don't look at Muslim immigration as a swarm. They're less than 1% in the US and just around about 6% in the UK. There's no swarm. But let's also face some facts. The vast majority of migration, or what they try to call also illegal migration or refugees, are fleeing from countries devastated by wars undertaken by Western states. Before Iraq war, there was barely any Kurdish communities in the UK, but now there's an increased number. Before America aborted invasion of Somalia and the devastation and the instability, I should say, that they caused within Somalia, we hardly saw any Somalis in Europe. After that, suddenly there became an increased number of Somalis leaving the country, which was unstable, which had created problems because of Western interference. See, invasion, occupation of countries like Afghanistan resulted in large numbers of Afghan refugees coming to Europe, as we now see. The point is there's a clear correlation between wars conducted by the West and the problems of refugees. But rather than acknowledge that, we're told that they want Sharia law, that they're invading the country or invading the West, that these are military-aged men and they want to try and colonize the West. What BS gaslighting is taking place? Now, I don't deny Israel has played a role in pushing America into wars in the Middle East. But let's be honest, and this is where the right will not necessarily acknowledge this point, particularly, the anti-Zionist right. America, Britain and Western states don't need Israel to push them into wars of occupation. It's in their DNA. Centuries of colonization, ethnic cleansing and genocide by Western states is there for all for us to see. America was founded upon genocide of native inhabitants. Churchill himself justified colonization of non-European countries because he believed that they were the superior race, superior civilization against an inferior people. So yes, Israel pushes the West, but really it's part of Western DNA to do this, invasion and create instability and chaos within the Muslim world, or what they see as non-European, non-Western world within the world today. Here's Nick again about cancel culture.
When Trump got elected, there was this feeling that cancel culture was over, right? Am I wrong in saying this? A year ago, I think you could even say it was the consensus. You have license to be cruel to brown people. Am I wrong? That's what that meant. When people said cancel culture was over, it meant that you can say offensive things about black people again, about brown people, about Muslims. And it goes the same way in the right wing. Let me ask you this. If I went live on my show on Monday, this coming Monday, and I said, Islam, I said, these Muslims need to go home, them. They're barbarians, they're third worldists, they like to live in open sewage and bomb crap. You think any conservative would disavow me? Any of them? Any Republican? You think if I was known for saying that, do you think I would have any trouble getting into CPAC or the New York Young Republican Club Gala or the GOP? Of course not, because Laura Loomer has access to the White House and she says stuff like that. Ben Shapiro has access to Trump and he says stuff like that. Could you imagine? Not to be a boomer here, but could you imagine if the shoe were on the other foot? It has to be left unsaid. Could I turn around and say Judaism and those Jews and send them back to Israel? Like, it's literally unthinkable to even say the words. But we all know it's tolerated with Muslims. Here's the point. Cancel culture never ended. Cancel culture was always about this, and I think people even underestimated that.
I hate to say I told you so, but I did tell you that cancel culture has always existed. In fact, even amongst the right. You can speak the most awful things about Islam and Muslims, and you won't be cancelled. Israel and Zionism, however, are simply sacred cows that you can't criticize. If you do, you're labeled anti-Semitic, racist, banned, barred, made unemployed, all of these things. Again, it's a clear Zionist agenda, allowing, in fact, promoting anti-Muslim hatred, allowing this to occur. It's not a cancelable offense if people were to attack and, say some abhorrent things against Islam and Muslims. That's fine, so long as you don't speak out against Zionists, Israel, or even Judaism. And I'm not here to say that you should be speaking out and saying abhorrent things about another religion or Judaism or anything like that. But the point is that it's there done to divert attention away from Zionists and what Israel is doing towards the Muslims and saying they're the problem. As I said, create hatred and fear of Muslims as a way to justify the actions of Israel. But, and this is important, this isn't a new playbook invented by the Zionists. The whole debate about halal meat, Sharia courts, problems with Muslims in the West, mosques being extremist centers of radicalization, grooming gangs, even how Muslim women are oppressed with the hijab and how it should be banned. That's the narrative that was being pushed in the 2000s by Western governments to justify their occupation and invasion of Muslim countries. I did a video in how Labour, when they were in power throughout the 2000s, how they instigated and pushed these very anti-Muslim tropes because they wouldn't acknowledge that their wars were of occupation, were illegal, and was therefore their own, self-interest. And the resulting blowback wasn't a blowback because of their invasion and occupation and the killing of hundreds of thousands of Muslims. They didn't want to acknowledge that. And we saw the same thing in regards to America and the Bush administration throughout the 2000s. They wanted to justify occupation by demonizing the Muslims, demonizing Islam, to justify that they had to go there. Otherwise, if they didn't go there to Iraq and Afghanistan and elsewhere, that those Muslims will come here and undertake, actions and terrorism, etc., and kill lots of people. So they were trying to justify that. Way to do that? Dehumanize them. This is exactly what they did. So yeah, Israel and Zionists are doing this, doing the same thing. They fund far-right parties, and far-right individuals, give all expense-paid trips to people like Apos or David Wood or Laura Loomer or even Tel Aviv Tommy and a host of other idiot, anti-Muslim types. But don't think that if there wasn't Zionism, there wouldn't be this manufactured hatred against Islam and Muslims. It's part of the DNA of the West and their political elites. They used to oppose the Muslim world and justify their direct occupation of the Muslim world by dehumanizing, by claiming that they're barbarians and they had the right to go over there to subjugate the Muslim world for their own benefit. But at least one thing both the right and the left are starting to realize is the Zionist playbook here. Use hatred and fear of Islam, push racist tropes to divert attention away from their crimes. For them, they see that that's the agenda. And it's good, at least, that now even the right, or certain number of people from the right, like Candace Owens or, like Nick Fuentes or even Tucker Carlson, are starting to see through this, starting to see through these lies. But this is something that I've been mentioning in many videos now. Maybe, inshallah, they've been watching this channel and maybe they've learned something. But even if they haven't, probably they haven't. But I think it shows how we need more Muslim political channels and more support for these channels, because whether it's me or other channels out there, we've been talking about these issues. We've been giving the correct takes on these particular issues, and we need to amplify our voices and amplify this message, because it's not the right or the left that are going to have the correct takes and the correct views. Really, it's only going to be us. I know it sounds like crazy. I'm not saying, therefore, that they're going to be wrong in everything and you can't learn from what they're saying and some of the arguments and some of the points. I'm not saying that. But ultimately, it's we as Muslims, we have to build our own political voice. We should be influencing the political medium, influencing these discussions, not the other way around, where we only accept, this narrative now because somehow Nick has said it, or Owen Jones has said it, or Candace Owens has said it. No, we should be accepting it because what we are saying is valid, is important, and we need to amplify that as best we can.